In 1970, a man who ran a two-pump Sohio station on the Ohio River in Marietta, Ohio, was known for something strange. His regulars almost never needed a big repair. Other garages down the road pulled engines and sold rebuilds all day. His customers just kept driving year after year on the same tired-looking cars that refused to break. He drove a 1965 Ford himself, past 300,000 miles, and never once opened the engine. He was no better a mechanic than the men who rebuilt motors all day. He simply taught his customers a handful of habits that kept the engine from ever needing them. Most of those habits cost nothing. Number 13 is the one nobody does anymore. But the one underneath all of it, the thing he made every driver do before he trusted them with a car, is number 1. And any of them still cuts a modern repair bill in half. He was not unusual for his time. In 1970, there was a man like him at half the stations in America, watching how you pulled off the lot and listening to your engine while he washed your windshield. Drivers knew their cars then. They warmed them, listened to them, and caught the small trouble before it became the big one. We stopped doing that, not because engines got harder, but because they got quiet and sealed, and we were told a computer would watch them for us. It does not. It waits until the part fails, then sends you to a shop that makes its money on the repair you could have prevented. We did not lose these habits. They were trained out of us. Number 21 is a 30-second habit that saves the most expensive engine on a modern car, the one with a turbo, and almost no one does it. Number 13 is the service the industry stopped reminding you about because the failure it prevents is one of the most profitable repairs they sell. And number 1, the habit that Marietta man made every driver do before he handed back the keys, costs nothing, takes 1 mile, and is the reason his customers' engines outlived everyone else's. These 25 habits were not about mechanical skill. They were about a relationship with the engine, the kind a man had when he could hear it, feel it, and knew it would carry his family only as long as he cared for it. Not a repair, a way of driving. Every habit on this list, that Marietta man drove by and taught. This is what he knew. Hit that subscribe button, and let us count down the 25 forgotten 1970 engine habits that still cut repair bills in half on any modern car. Number 25, idling a few seconds after a cold start. 10 seconds that spared the whole engine. You started it and waited 10 or 15 seconds before you put it in gear, letting the oil reach the top of the engine. Drive off the instant it fires, and the valvetrain runs dry for the first block. A cab driver in 1970 who cold started a dozen times a shift gave everyone that pause, because the first seconds cost more wear than 100 miles. The Marietta man would not let a car leave his lot until the oil light was out and the gauge had come up. The engine woke slowly. He never rushed it out the door. Number 24, never lugging the engine, the low, straining grind that hammered the bearings. When the engine dropped too low in too high a gear and shuddered under your foot, you downshifted. Lugging loads the bearings and rods at the worst angle, a gear lower ran cooler and lasted longer. The Marietta man could hear a driver lugging from inside the station, and he would come out and coach them through it because he had watched too many good engines killed slowly by a heavy foot in a tall gear. He said an engine told you it was straining, and a driver only had to listen and drop a gear. The engine was not weak. It was in the wrong gear and begging you to change it. Number 23, setting the choke right on a cold start. Enough to catch, never enough to flood. On a carbureted engine, you gave the pedal the pumps it needed and no more, Set the choke and let it catch. Flood it, and raw fuel washes the oil off the cylinder walls and into the pan. A farmer in 1970 who cold-started a truck every dawn learned the exact touch his engine wanted, because a flooded start was a dry, scraping start. Every engine of the era ran a carburetor and a choke. A cold start ritual the fuel injection of later cars took out of the driver's hands. The Marietta man taught the boy who pumped his gas the feel of it on a dozen different cars. The choke was a conversation. He knew how to answer it. Number 22, never flooring a cold engine. The full-throttle launch that wore a year off in a mile. Until the needle came off cold, you kept your foot light. A cold engine has thick oil, tight clearances, and no film where it needs one, and full throttle grinds metal that would glide once warm. A young man in 1970 who raced his cold engine out of the driveway wondered why his rings were gone at 80,000 when his father's ran past 200. The Marietta man said the first mile cold was the most expensive mile you would ever drive. Cold metal does not forgive. He never asked it to. Number 21. Letting a hard-run engine idle down before shutoff. The 30 seconds that saved the hottest parts. After a hard pull or a long climb, you let the engine idle half a minute before you killed it, so the oil could carry the heat away instead of leaving it to bake in. Kill a hard-run engine at once, and the oil in the hot spots cooks to varnish. A truck driver in 1970 idled down at the top of every grade because the parts that ran hottest died first. On a modern engine with a turbo, this same 30 seconds is the difference between a turbo that lasts and a $1,500 failure, which is why it belongs on any modern car. The Marietta man let every hard-run engine settle before he touched the key. Heat is what kills an engine. He gave it time to leave. Number 20. Backing off before the last stop. No final rev before the key. In the last block before you parked, you eased off and let the engine come down to idle before you shut it off. No blipping the throttle, no revving it one last time, which only throws raw fuel and leaves oil where it should have drained. A careful man in 1970 rolled the last stretch to his driveway gently, the way he coasted a boat to a dock. The Marietta man never revved an engine he was about to shut off. You started it gently. It only made sense to stop it the same way.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us, who still believe a man should be able to keep his own car running. It's the Forgotten Mechanic's Handbook, the old-fashioned car repair secrets our grandfathers used to fix any engine and keep it running for decades. But these skills are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. Don't pay another mechanic ever again. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait right here.
Number 19. A smooth, steady throttle. The even foot that outlasted the nervous one. You fed the throttle in smooth and held it steady, instead of the constant stab and lift of an impatient driver. Every hard-on, hard-off cycle heat shocks the parts and jerks the drivetrain. A country doctor in 1970 who drove 80 miles a day at a steady pace put 300,000 miles on one car. The Marietta man drove like he had all the time in the world, and his engines did. The engine did not mind work. It minded whiplash. Number 18. Never winding it to redline for no reason. The needless abuse that shortened everything. You used the power when you needed it and never just to hear it. Holding an engine near its limit multiplies the load on every bearing and valve spring. A salesman in 1970 who babied his company car still had his engine when the hot rodders were long rebuilt. The Marietta man had nothing to prove to an engine, and it repaid him. The red line was a limit, not a destination. Number 17, chasing any new sound the same day. The small noise that was the engine asking for help. The day the engine made a sound it had not made yesterday, you found out why before you drove it hard again. A new tick, whine, or knock is the cheapest warning you ever get. Ignore it, and the $10 fix becomes the $1,000 one. A machinist in 1970 pulled over for a faint new knock and found a loose bolt. A week of driving would have found a hole in the block. Before sensors and warning lamps, the driver's own EAR was the entire early warning system, and it worked better than most of what replaced it. The Marietta man could name a failure from the passenger seat before the driver finished describing it. The engine always spoke first. Most people just stopped listening. Here is something worth knowing. Walk onto any new car lot, and the salesman is not where the money is made. The service department is. For most dealerships, the shop out back that fixes engines is the real profit center, and it has been for decades. It means an entire industry is built on the repair, not the prevention. No one at that shop makes $1 teaching you to warm your engine, ease the first mile, or chase a noise the day you hear it. Every one of those habits is a repair that never happens, a rebuild that never gets sold. The 1970 mechanic taught the habits because he was not selling you the failure. He was selling you the years. The carburetor a driver could understand became a sealed system he cannot touch, and the knowledge that kept engines alive was allowed to die with the hands that had it. Not by conspiracy, by a simple fact: nobody profits from the repair you prevent. Number 16, watching the temperature gauge, the one needle that could kill the engine in a mile. You watched the temperature gauge, and the moment it climbed toward hot, you shut down and looked. An overheated engine warps ahead or seizes, sometimes in a mile. A traveling family in 1970 pulled over at the first climb of the needle and saved an engine a burst hose would have destroyed by the next exit. The engines of the era ran a real temperature gauge, not the single warning light that later replaced a driver's steady watch with a last-second alarm. The Marietta man taught every customer that the temperature gauge was the most important instrument on the dash. Heat killed engines faster than miles ever did. Number 15, watching the oil pressure, the needle that meant life or a seized block. You knew where the oil pressure sat, and if it fell, you killed the engine at once. Low pressure means the bearings are running dry, and an engine can destroy itself in under a minute. A trucker in 1970 shut down the instant his pressure dropped, and saved a motor a mile of denial would have welded solid. The Marietta man said a falling oil needle was the only reason to stop an engine in the middle of the road. Oil pressure was the engine's pulse. He never ignored it. Number 14, checking the oil and coolant every week. 5 minutes that caught the slow loss. Once a week, cold and on level ground, you pulled the dipstick and looked in the coolant. A level dropping slowly was a leak caught early, while it was still a small repair. A widow in 1970 who knew nothing about cars checked both every Sunday because her husband had shown her, and her engine outlived 3 of her neighbors. The Marietta man could teach the check in 10 minutes, and did to anyone who asked. The engine ran on oil and water. He never guessed at either. Number 13, keeping the cooling system fresh. The flush nobody does anymore. Every couple of years, you flushed the old coolant and put in fresh, because coolant wears out. Spent coolant turns acidic and eats the radiator, the water pump, and the passages inside the block from within. A fleet manager in 1970 flushed every truck on a schedule, having done the math on a cooked engine versus a jug of coolant. An overheating failure from neglected coolant destroys a modern engine exactly as it did in 1970, which is why this belongs on any modern car, and why the shops rarely remind you. The Marietta man flushed his own cooling system on time, every time, for 50 cents in coolant. The cheapest jug on the shelf prevented the priciest repair in the shop. Number 12. Fixing a small leak the day you saw it. The $2 hose that saved the engine. The day you found a weep of oil or a drip of coolant, you fixed it before it emptied on the highway. A $5 hose caught early stood between you and a seized engine miles from home. A mechanic's father in 1970 replaced a swollen hose the day he spotted it and never had the roadside blowout that stranded the men who waited. The Marietta man fixed the small thing on the spot, and the big thing never came. The leak was cheap the day you found it. It got expensive by waiting. Number 11. Keeping the engine bay clean. So a new leak had nowhere to hide. You wiped the engine down and kept it clean, not for looks, but so a fresh leak showed as a bright streak against clean metal. A filthy engine hides the very drip that is trying to warn you. A shop foreman in 1970 kept every engine he owned spotless because he had learned you cannot read a dirty engine. The Marietta man kept his own engine clean enough to read like a page. A clean engine told the truth. A dirty one kept its secrets. Number 10. Never driving through a misfire. The stumble that burned a valve, or worse. When the engine began to stumble or run rough, you fixed it before you drove on. A misfire dumps raw fuel and runs a cylinder hot and lean, and left alone, it burns a valve or washes down a bore. A delivery driver in 1970 who ran a missing engine a week to finish his route bought a valve job a Saturday tune-up would have spared him. The points, plugs, and condenser of the era needed regular attention, and a driver who kept up rarely met the failures neglect caused. The Marietta man tuned an engine at the first stumble, never the 10th. A misfire was a small problem shouting to stay small. Here is the part of his story we have not told. The Marietta man did not learn this from a book. He learned it pumping gas as a boy at that same station, watching the old owner ride along on test drives with his hand flat on the dashboard, feeling the engine through the frame. For 2 years, the old man made him warm every car, creep the first mile, and listen until his hands knew the difference. And when the boy gunned a cold engine off the lot, he made him walk back and do it again. One winter, the boy heard a wrist pin knock before the old man did, and the old man just nodded and let him take the next car out alone. He ran that station for the rest of his life. He never advertised and never had to because his customers' cars did not break. And the one habit the old man drilled into him before all the others, the thing he did before he let a car roll onto the road, is almost here. It is number 1. Number 9. Changing the air filter before it choked the engine. The cheapest part with the widest reach. You checked the air filter and changed it when it was dirty, long before it clogged. A choked filter starves the engine of air and lets grit into the cylinders where it grinds like sandpaper. A dust country farmer in 1970 changed his filter twice as often as the manual said, having seen what a summer of grit did to an engine. The Marietta man checked the filter on every car that came in for gas. Clean air was free. The wear from dirty air was not. Number 8. Never running the tank near empty. the habit that saved the fuel pump and the engine's diet. You kept fuel in the tank and did not ride the bottom. The sediment and water that settle in a tank gets sucked up when you run it low, and on later cars, the fuel itself cools the pump. A rural mailman in 1970 never let his tank drop below a quarter, because the nearest station was 30 miles and the junk in the bottom was closer. The sediment problem was worse in the era's steel tanks, but the habit protects a modern fuel system just as well. The Marietta man told every customer to fill at a quarter tank, not on the fumes. The bottom of the tank was where the trouble waited, and he stayed out of it. Number 7, combining short trips so the engine reached full heat. The warm-through that burned off what killed engines. Instead of a dozen cold 2-mile hops, you ran your errands together so the engine reached full temperature. An engine that never fully warms, never boils off the moisture and fuel in the oil, and that brew turns to sludge and acid. A city driver in 1970 who only drove to the corner store wore an engine out faster than a salesman who drove 300 miles a day. The engines of the era were as vulnerable to short-trip sludge as any modern one, and the cure was the same. The Marietta man told the short-trip drivers to take the long way home once a week. A cold engine never cleaned itself. It only collected. Number 6, going easy on the starter. Short cranks and a rest between. If it did not catch in a few seconds, you stopped, waited, and tried again, rather than grinding the starter until it smoked. A starter held too long overheats and burns out and drags the battery flat. A mother in 1970 with a stubborn car learned to crank in short bursts because a burned starter cost more than patience. The Marietta man cranked in short, patient tries and taught the boy to do the same. The starter was there to start, not to be punished. Number 5, matching the gear to the load. No hauling the world in top gear. Pulling a trailer or climbing a grade, you dropped a gear and let the engine turn faster and breathe. Lugging a heavy load in a tall gear overheats the engine and hammers the bearings, worse than lugging on the flat. A hauler in 1970 who geared down for every hill outlasted the men who muscled up in top gear and cooked theirs. The Marietta man geared down for a load without thinking, the way you lean into a hill on foot. The engine could pull the weight. It only asked for the right gear. Number 4, not idling forever to warm it up. The gentle drive that warmed it faster and cleaner. In the cold, you gave it a short idle for oil pressure, then drove gently because an engine warms faster and more evenly under a light load than sitting still. A long, cold idle washes fuel down the bores and dilutes the oil while barely warming it. A northern nurse in 1970 on winter shifts idled just long enough to clear the glass, then drove soft, and her engine thanked her for it. The rich, cold idle of a carbureted engine washed cylinders worse than a modern one, but gentle driving remains the cleaner warm-up on any car. The Marietta man said the road warmed an engine better than the driveway ever could. An engine warmed best by working gently, not by waiting. Number 3, noticing the first change, the new sound, the new smell, the new feel. You knew your car well enough that the first thing to change stood out, a faint new vibration, a whiff of coolant, a soft new noise at idle. That first small change was always the cheapest moment to act. The Marietta man built his whole reputation on this, and built it into his customers too. He taught them to know the normal so well that the abnormal announced itself, and to come in the day it did. The ones who learned it brought him a whisper of a problem. The rest brought him a wreck. The engine warned you every time. He taught people to hear the warning. Number 2, the weekly walk-around. 5 minutes that made every other habit work. Once a week, you spent 5 minutes with the car, the oil, the coolant, your hands on the hoses and belts, a look at the ground underneath for a fresh spot. It was not a repair. It was a standing appointment with the machine that carried your family. The Marietta man did this every Sunday and taught the boy who pumped his gas that the 5 minutes were worth more than anything on the lift. He said the men who walked around their cars once a week never met him on his worst day, standing over a dead engine. The lift was where engines were fixed. The driveway was where they were saved. Number 1, the gentle first mile. That is all, and it is what this whole list has circled from the start. Before you asked the engine for anything, you gave it one gentle mile. No hard throttle, no high revs, no load, just easy motion while the oil reached everything and the metal warmed. Most of an engine's wear happens in those first cold minutes, and the driver who babies them never meets the rebuild. The Marietta man made every driver do it before he handed back the keys, and had done it himself since the winter. The old owner made him creep a cold engine off the lot a second time. It was the first thing his boss ever taught him, and the last thing he taught the boy who took over the station. Every other habit on this list was only this one, made specific. Number 1 is not a trick, it is a mile. Give the engine that mile and it will give you the years. It has been asking for nothing else all along. A 1970 driver did not have a computer watching his engine. He had his own 2 hands, his senses, and a handful of habits, and they worked better than the warning lamp that replaced them. He warmed the engine and eased the first mile. He listened for the sound that was not there yesterday. He watched 2 needles and checked 2 fluids and fixed the small thing the day he saw it. None of it took skill. It took attention and the belief that the machine would carry him only as far as he cared for it. Here is the part they do not tell you. Every one of these habits still works on any modern car in your driveway right now. The engine is quieter and sealed tighter, but it is the same bargain. Warm it, ease it, listen to it, catch the small trouble early, and you will cut your repair bills in half, as they did in 1970. The car changed. The care did not. We did not lose these habits because they stopped working. We lost them because we were told a machine would remember them for us, and it does not. It waits. But the knowledge is not gone. Somewhere there is still a man who learned it at a 2-pump station on a river, who rode along with his hand flat on the dash, and taught a boy to give a cold engine 1 easy mile before asking it for anything. The boy learned, and on his last day at that station, he rode along with someone new, put his hands on the dash and said, "Feel that. That is an engine that is going to last. Now let it warm up."